If you as a coach spend 10 to 15 hours a week on your coaching business, you will be able to move things forward and do some significant needle moving activities.
You just need a little map of how to do the conversations. That's the only really map you need is what does it take to create these conversations?
Thinking about the business of coaching, and we often have to wear all the hats. But as that success happens and you get consistent and then you are scaling, you get to take off all of those extraneous hats that are not your zone of genius, which could include the types and specific things that you do in your coaching.
Having a system about how to manage yourself is actually pretty useful too.
What's up, Coaches Nation? This is Dr. Sherry with another episode of the Coach's Journey podcast with my amazing host, who's so excited in living the life of a newborn, or with a newborn, not of a newborn, but with a newborn, Daniel Fernandez.
Sometimes it feels like I'm a newborn.
Our topic today is something, honestly, it's one of the most frequently asked topics that I get as a coach. And we're going to talk about this in the context of being a coach. And chances are you probably have had these conversations with your own clients, but now we're going to flip it and we're going to have these conversations about you and about us as coaches. And it is around the topic of how do I be the most productive as a coach? What does productivity look like in my coaching business? So we're going to unpack that and talk about what that looks like over the journey of being a coach, because this is the coach's journey. And we're going to talk about some ideas, insights, and just things to think about and how to apply things maybe a little bit differently in your business. So you don't want to miss out on this.
Yeah. And Sherry, whenever people talk about productivity, it's always really fascinating to see where people's minds go. And I think this is where mine used to go and sometimes still does, which is like, I need to get more stuff done. That's productivity. And it's not. It's totally not. Like, more stuff actually could make you less productive. And how's that? It's because if you're getting the wrong stuff done, or the stuff that doesn't actually matter, or stuff that doesn't move the needle as much, like, you can get a lot of stuff done and get nowhere towards what you care about. You can get other people's goals moving forward, but not your own goals. So, like, what is productivity, right? What does that mean? I think we got to really be sure, like, what is the desire? What's the goal? What's the target? What's the outcome that our productivity is all for, right? Like, why be that productive? Why try to be productive towards what end? And it's different for everybody. So I want to just like throw that out there first. Like, it really matters what the outcome and the goal is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to set the frame in the Coaching Mastery community, which is a sponsor for this podcast. We have a perspective that if you as a coach spend 10 to 15 hours a week on your coaching business, you will be able to move things forward and do some significant needle moving activities. Because when we think about like, hey, I'm going to do coaching, I'm going to do this full time, we think like 40 hours and then we're like, oh my God, then we start filling our time with all of these things, which are activities, but may not actually be the most important. So I want to set the frame that you don't have to spend 40 hours. You actually can spend 10 to 15 dedicated hours a week on the most important things. So, and that is what we're going to talk about today is what are the most important things? I am a victim of Canva, and
I love it. Just rolling off your tongue.
I could easily spend 40 hours in a week just on Canva. I would create myself, and I've done this. I would create myself 25 different logos. I would market test those on Facebook. Hey, which one do you like the most? I would then take some worksheets that I found and I would recreate them to my own worksheets, make them look pretty, and then never actually give them away to anybody. So these are literally things that I have done. And so if you're like, oh my gosh, that so much sounds like me too. Okay, welcome to the club. I am Dr. Sherry. I am a Canva addict. And that is probably not the most fruitful and productive way to spend your time.
I love that you share that one, Sherry. Like, that is such a good one, because the thing that happens is there's things that we love doing,
Yes.
and are just like naturally drawn towards whatever it is. If you like the graphic designer and you like wants to come out and you need a place for that graphic designer to play, well then like I could play all day long. Just like my toddler could just play all day long. But you know what? He actually has to go to the potty. He actually has to go to school. So it's like it's fun to play, and we should have the time for fun. But it should be the right amount of time. And that's where your like executive function needs to come out and decide like, how do I actually decide where to spend my time? And is the Canva play time going to take over my life? Because it would if I let it, right?
Absolutely. And so just to put kind of the ending of the story on that one is once I realized that that really wasn't one of the needle moving activities in my business, I now do that at night when I wouldn't be working otherwise. And often when I'm sitting watching TV with the kids, like if they're watching a show or something and I'm not super interested in it, I will, have my laptop out and I'll be doing that stuff. So really is at times that I would not be doing business work otherwise. So that really is kind of my playtime. So let's get down and dirty on what are really the most income producing, most productive activities that we can do. And I want us to think about it in like 3 different business phases. And these 3 business phases are 3 phases you will find in any entrepreneur book. So they're just kind of, this is what it is. And the first phase is kind of the launch phase or the foundation phase of your business. And so this is going to be where you just started deciding to coach, or you're still kind of in the mode of like, how am I going to figure this out? How am I going to get clients? And there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of trial and error, a lot of testing, and just really not sure. So that all kind of goes into the launch phase. So we're going to unpack that a little bit. The second and the third phases, the second phase is where things are starting to be consistent in your business. And that looks different on what productivity looks like than your launch phase. And then the third phase is after you've had some consistency. Now you might decide you want to scale and do, go big. And so there's some different activities that will create productivity for there that might be different in the other 3. So that is the framework that we're going to use today in talking about productivity.
This is interesting, Sherry, that you bring it up this way, because I think for most people in our community, we're talking about phase 1 and phase 2.
Yeah.
I think. So maybe like phase 3 would be a great another episode for a whole podcast on phase 3. But I think right now, we really want to talk about the things that get coaches stuck when it comes to productivity and the things that actually turn on the gas, right? And I think moving from phase 1 to phase 2 is actually a really good goal. To moving from like figuring, like just like not sure, figuring stuff out, to being consistent. And there's 2 forms of consistency. One is the one you talked about just now, I think, which is the one where your business is consistent. But the other consistency is where you are consistent in how you show up. Right. And that's actually one of the biggest challenges for coaches in productivity that I would say is true for most industries. Actually, it's being consistent yourself. But in some other industries, and especially when you're not working for yourself, it's a lot easier to be consistent on the Canva playtime stuff because it comes easier. And sometimes it's deceptive. It's not just like I'm playtime. It's like the thing I know how to do already. Like if I know how to do tech stuff, I'm going to spend all my time on tech because that's where I came from in the tech world. So like whatever the thing is, being consistent on the right things is the challenge for coaches, because a lot of the time people coming to the coaching world, they're coming from other industries, and the coaching industry is very different. It's very, very different. And so is entrepreneurship. It's different from having a job. And there's like some really key differences there that you don't really get at the beginning. So like that whole first phase 1, it's like you don't get anything, but you think you get things and you don't. And even if you know that you don't get things, like there's like just figuring stuff out and like just like clunking through it all. And the goal is to get from phase 1 to phase 2 where you're consistent. So thereby the lag variable, which is your business becomes consistent as a result of you being consistent. That's really the phase 2. Yes. Right. I think I want to focus both of those. Like, how do you get through the uncertainty and murkiness? And then how do you get to the consistency phase and where you know what to be consistent on? Right.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a lot of patterns here we can talk about.
So I just based on the analogy you used a little bit earlier, let's frame this in the activities that are like gas on fire, and then the activities that are like on water on fire. So the things that actually create productivity and the things that extinguish it. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that create productivity or that are productive during that launch phase.
Yeah, I think this is actually in phase 1 and 2. It's the same thing for both. It's like, and this is the conversation I keep on having with myself and with other people, other coaches, which is having conversations. If you're having conversations on a consistent basis, you're moving the needle. And that sometimes it doesn't feel like you're moving the needle. It feels like you're just clunking through and you have no idea what you're doing. And these conversations are totally pointless. But having conversations is how you learn how to make them pointful. It's how you learn who the right people are to talk to, how you learn what you want to say, how you learn how to express your voice. Having conversations is the one fuel on the flame. Like, how are you prospecting or clienting? It's like, I like to use the word clienting, right? It involves like sitting down and figuring out who do you know, who do they know, talking to them, setting up calls, setting up connection calls, setting up strategy or discovery sessions, having the sales call, doing a coaching within that, or coaching people in a paid program or even free. All that clienting is just conversations and messaging. It's like, it's a messaging conversation, or it's a verbal conversation, or it's an in-person conversation, whatever the form of the conversations you're creating. That's the biggest fuel for the flame. And I think sometimes we feel like I'll message somebody and they'll message me back and then it'll kind of die out. That's not really a conversation yet. That's just the connection. It's a touch point. A conversation is something that's moving forward. It has momentum of its own. So like that, to me, creating conversations is like at every stage, whether you're getting paid for it or not, like that is the fuel for the business. And so if you can get consistent at doing that, spend like the vast majority, 70% of your time should be spent on conversations, conversating, clienting. That to me is the biggest fuel for the flame. That like, just want to come right out of the gate and say that.
I love that. And some of the water on the flame that we see a lot, and I have definitely been stuck here at times, is thinking that things like the more Facebook posts I do is going to create more conversations. And I have yet to meet a coach that has been able to build a robust practice just based on their social media posts. Not to say that social media posts are irrelevant and don't matter, but when you're at the beginning phases of, in the launch phase, it's getting those personal touches, having those actual conversations with people. And so just depending on a Facebook post is going to be a time waster for you. Like that is what we've seen. Now,
well, can you clarify, Jerry? Like, depending on it is a time waster, but doing it is not necessarily a time waster. Like posting something to Facebook is not necessarily. So there's an interesting fire water mix here, because if you have, and I will say it from my perspective, I don't have currently social media. I'm actually part of my plan to grow that this year because of this very specific strategic need in my coaching business and my life. But I've been able to build a coaching business, a sustainable coaching business without social media at all. So it can be done.
Yes.
That being said, I also know that posting on Facebook can be a very powerful strategy for credibility and for giving you the practice that you need to have the confidence to put your voice out there. And so, but it doesn't automatically create the conversations you need to be having. So having a social media presence will allow people to see what you're up to, and like, I don't know about you, which will give you that extra credibility and push when you're actually having the conversations, having those messages about things with people, right? They'll be way more interested in talking to you as a result, right?
Yes. So it's the idea of focusing on what do you need short-term versus long-term.
Yeah.
And when you think about that in anything in life, it's not the why. The wisdom is thinking about both. But so I'm going to use investing as an example. And so when we think about investing, my perspective is posting on social media is like putting money in your 401k. You're doing a little bit on an ongoing basis, but you don't really have access to the results right now. But you are building something that's compounding, and you are going to experience that benefit in the future, but not right now. You're not experiencing
401k is a retirement fund that's locked in. You can't access until 65 years old. For those of you who don't know what a 401k is.
Thank you for explaining that. And then the other thing is investing in something that's super short term, that you can make some money on it, like right now, this week, or next month. And so those are both of those are really important, because if you don't have how to make money now, then like, how are you going to live? And then how are you actually going to then fund the 401k for the future? But if you never do the 401k, then you're only living day to day, and you don't have a larger long-term plan. So
Can
I
I
do,
turn that into an analogy part of what we're talking about? So the fire,
yeah,
your fuel for the fire is conversations, but social media is like handing little gallon gasoline containers to people in your network. So one day they're gonna pour the fuel on the fire themselves.
I love that. I love that. Yes. So, but then the reason I bring social media up now is because it is so easy to get sucked into all of those things. How do I run ads? How do I do all this stuff? But if you don't even know how to have an effective sales conversation or to have sessions that lead to people paying you and getting an immense amount of value and being able to give you testimonies, regardless of if they paid you for that session or not, if you are not in the position of mastering or starting to master that, I mean, if you're paying for a bunch of leads to come in, it's going to be like a filter or a, they're going to fall out because you still have to build your skill of how to serve them and how to have those powerful conversations. That is why those powerful conversations is like the most productive thing you can have on the front end.
Yeah, and you brought up the word sales. So I just want to anything to do with sales is actually linked to your productivity as a coach. And sales does not mean just selling stuff. It means the entire process from initiating a conversation to carrying that conversation through to actually having that coaching conversations where you can invite people to coach with you. That's a sale. You don't have to call it a sale, whatever you want. It's an invitation to actually getting them in your programs. Like that's all part of the sale. And the sales process is the whole customer journey from finding out about you to actually being in your program. That is a long lead time prospect. Like it takes multiple touches and often takes multiple conversations. So it could take a week. It could take, in some cases, years, depending how long you nurture that lead. But coaching is a relationship game. So if you're building relationships and having conversations, each of those conversations has the potential to connect you with a client or a network of people that you can add value to. And so part of that is serving, and part of that is actually having these sales conversations. So like sales is like conversations is actually sales. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
If you think selling something is doing somebody a disservice, then you have to adjust somehow. You may not believe that you're providing enough value, right? You have to adjust somehow. Maybe you're not confident in that this is worth it, because we buy things all the time. We buy things all the time that we think are valuable. Do we hate the people who are selling them to us? No, we bought it willingly, right? So make sure that you believe in the value that you're providing. Make sure you believe in the program so that you can have these conversations with confidence, because that's where the productivity is. It's like the gas is going to come from the conversations, that whole sales process.
Yeah, love that.
And the water is actually everything that stops you from doing that. Everything that's not directly related to supporting that. So for example, you might need to do some learning about coaching. You might need to do some practice coaching. You might need to be able to ask questions. That's why Coaching Mastery Community, for example, has a community where you can ask questions, get support, get trained on how to do these pieces of the pieces of the sales conversations. You may want to join our coaching chain in Coaching Mastery Community, whatever it is that you need to give you the confidence to have those conversations. That's where you want to focus. So anything that's not doing that, especially at the beginning, is probably a lot of water. Like I'm projecting myself here, which is when I first started coaching, I did everything except have those conversations for the longest time. Like, oh, I gotta get my website done. Oh, I gotta get a business card. Let me name my company. That probably took me a week or two. And then it's like, oh, I don't like that name. I gotta get my LLC started. Or do I? I don't even know. Let me do some research. It took all this stuff took so long because it's stuff that felt more comfortable. It's not because it was hard or complicated. I could have probably gotten months of work done in a week if I knew what was more important, right? Because here's the thing: once you get that first person who might become your client, you're like, all that stuff will get done really fast. The stuff that didn't matter before that matters now. You have oh, I need a way to accept money. Okay, before I make that offer, let me just set up a PayPal or something. You'll be able to get the money if your money is already available to you to make the sale on, right? So let that motivate you. Let the conversations motivate you to build the systems you need, especially at the beginning.
And honestly, I think it's not necessarily our fault that we think all these things have to be happened at the beginning. When I look back at how we're conditioned in society, you don't go anywhere unless you have a clear understanding of your map. And so, and I think if we carry that mindset into our business, that I need to have a map of the United States, because I'm going to travel from one end to the other. I'm going to need to know all my stopping points. I'm going to need to know how many miles I can go before I have to fill up with gas or recharge my car or whatever. If you think that you have to have that whole thing figured out before you start actually creating and having these conversations, that's going to be a hang up for you. That is water. That is like the mindset that is going to dampen your fire. And so that perspective, while it can be great in some areas of life, is not the most productive mindset for entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship is very much I can see what I need to do in front of me. So let me try that, and then let me iterate. But I'm going to say one kind of caveat. There is value in spending some time visioning, which we do this in Coaching Mastery Community, visioning, what do you want your coaching business to look like? What do you want it to do for your life? Why are you drawn to it? And it doesn't have to be super specific. It doesn't have to be that you have exactly what you're gonna, the offer you're gonna have now, and then how you're gonna shift that offer in a year, and then the group that you're gonna build in 3.5 years, and then you don't have to have all that figured out. But having a vision of how this fits into and incorporates into your life, and understanding and having some in the purpose of that is important. The details, the tactics of how that's all going to happen, don't worry about that. That will come to you. And honestly, if you try to figure it out to the beginning, I guarantee you it's going to change anyway. So don't spend too much time in the weeds of how all of that is going to happen. Trust the process. And when you have that bigger vision, as you develop that, then start the tactics of, what do you need to know right now? What do you need to do?
Yeah. And actually, it's funny that you mentioned this exactly the way you did, because we restarted our 90-day in Coaching Master community. We restarted the 90-day client creation challenge. And the point, you don't need to map out your whole business and the future and everything. You just need a little map of how to do the conversations. That's the only really map you need, is what does it take to create these conversations? And that actually is the whole 90-day challenge, is the map. We put it together and we presented it to our community this past Monday. And this is the map. There's like 9 steps in the map. And that's really like, one is like, take the first week, if you haven't done this yet, and create your vision. And there's like 6 steps that we have. Like, figure out what you want in your life, then figure out what's going to cost, then figure out what's your target take-home income, then figure out the programs that you need to create that. We have a whole framework around vision. If you do these 6 things, you'll be really set up to know what the next 3 years could look like. And I say could look like, to Sherry's point, it's probably going to look different. But you set a vision so you have a direction, you have a lighthouse you can navigate towards. And then once you have that, let's just get conversating, right? Start the conversations. And how you do the conversations? Well, you need to tap your network. It's part of the map we have. How do you tap your network? How do you generate referrals? How do you handle those objections and sales calls to get those clients? How do you price your offers? How do you structure your offers? Like, how do you do the prospecting conversations? All those details, that's like the how-to training that you're going to need. Yes. The map you need is just the conversations. You don't need to map everything out in your whole world, like forever. You need to think about, where do you want to get to and why? And what is it going to take? And then figure out the little pieces that you need to train yourself on how to do all the parts that you're going to need to do. It's really quite simple, but it is not easy.
So that is what our framework and what we believe is the most important things for kind of that launch phase of the coaching business. Daniel, was there anything else you wanted to add before we shift to the second phase, which is more of the consistency phase of coaching business?
Yeah. So I think the first phase, if I were to summarize, the gas is have the conversations and get that conversational map, not the whole world map, because you don't need to know everything about your business in the future. You just need to have a target that you can build towards. And then as you get into phase 2, I guess I would say 2A and 2B. 2A is like making you consistent on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis on the whole conversations piece, and like engaging with clients and so on, clienting. And then 2B would be where you feel the effects of that. And there's often a big lag between 2A and 2B. I feel like this is like, I've done this so many times over the last decade of being coach. I would start 2A and get really consistent for like 2 months. I would like every day I would have my spreadsheet of people and I would reach out to them and I would check in. Oh, I need to talk to this person. And then I would message them. and it would go somewhere and it would stop. And then like out of the 15 people that were on the list or 25 people eventually that were on the list, like I started building momentum, and it's like, I wasn't getting enough feedback of it working. So I stopped, and I probably stopped so often right before I would have hit that hockey stick a little bit on the exponential curve.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're, prospecting or conversating for 2 months, it's not probably going to be enough. It might to get you one client or maybe more. But for me, like once you pass that 3 month, then things start to catch up with you. The seeds you planted at the beginning in your garden on day one might come to fruition in month 4.
Yeah.
So if you're not willing to get to phase 2B because you gave up on phase 2A of being consistent yourself for long enough, then you might need to reevaluate your time horizon in your mind. Like maybe you think coaching is going to happen overnight for you, but like as a business, but it takes time. If you're not, as Faisal said earlier this week, if you're not in this for a long-term career, then you got to question, like, what are you in it? Are you in it for a quick buck? And then maybe the way that you want to do coaching is not going to work with our model here. Like that, it's going to take time. But if you do spend that time, get consistent and keep on going forward, that will become fruitful. That's kind of the 2A to 2B lag I think is a really important distinction here.
I totally agree. Because that's where people can start to get discouraged and give up, drop out. And that's also a reason why being part of a community is so important. So that when you are feeling discouraged, there's people around you that can remind you that this is normal, push through it. All right. So phase 2 of business is the consistency. And that's where the things that you did during your launch phase, all of your conversating is starting to actually materialize into things. And you're starting to actually see a little bit more predictability in your clients and your coaching business. So what then are the most productive activities that a person does, a coach does in kind of this phase? What do you think, Daniel?
Before I answer that, you make me think of something. People can jump straight from phase 1 to phase 2A pretty fast. If, for example, you join the 90-day challenge, you get the map of how to do the conversations, then you just make yourself consistent every single day. If that's all you did, you would just go straight to phase 2A, right? Now, being consistent long enough will get you to phase 2B. You don't have to spend a lot of time in phase 1. Maybe that 1 week to get those vision and the numbers down for yourself and the target plan. You just need to spend a week in phase 1. I spent years in phase 1, literally years, because I didn't have a community or a map of the conversational process. And I didn't understand sales. I didn't know how to do a sales call. Like all that took me years. So you can jump to 2A pretty fast with the right support, I think, which is why I think Coaching Mastery Community, for those coaches who are actively building their business right now, would be, a really good place to go to join the 90-day challenge. But remind me the question, Sherry.
So the question is now, we talked about phase 1, which you broke down into some sub phases, but now we're in phase 2, which is you're doing the things, you're doing the conversating, you're getting more comfortable with that, and it's having the result of getting more clients. So you're not in the panic of like, I don't know how to do this. Now you're like, okay, I'm seeing how I'm doing this and that it is working. And so during this phase, what are some of the most productive activities?
I can tell you what some of the least productive activities are.
All right, what's the water?
One is taking rejection personally.
Okay, yes.
Like it doesn't sound like it's like an activity, but it's totally an activity, because like if you get a rejection, it's going to affect you, especially if you haven't learned to like rely on the confidence of your consistency. If you have enough consistency, each rejection doesn't really matter. It's not even a rejection. It's just a not yet or a no or a next one or whatever you want to call it. Like the no's that you get, they're just learning moments for you. And because you're consistent, those shouldn't derail you, but they might. Because there's a whole emotional thing about coaching where like if you feel like you're selling yourself, and it's like it's a reflection of you and your self-worth, and oh, maybe I'm not cut out to be. There's so much that happens in this process of learning to be consistent, and just being consistent no matter what, because all these things are going to take away your consistency. The rejections you might get, the resistance you might get from your family. There's like so many emotional barriers that prevent you from being consistent. So that's, if you notice yourself not being consistent about prospecting and tapping your network and having those conversations, there's a few different sources of water on your fire here, and you need to think about what they are, so that you can realize that they don't have to stop you. So that would be like a way to be not productive. It's to let those things stop you from being consistent. And it could also just be like life complexity. For me, as an example, I'm in newborn land here, as we were talking about before the podcast started. And so, like, yeah, I was not able to be consistent in the first few months of my newborn's life. And I'm okay with that because that's kind of an intentional choice. But now here's another water that can stop you from being consistent. It's like the ramp up, the feeling of ramping back up. So one of the things that happens with coaches is we get into like marketing mode and then we stop because we got a couple clients and we're like, oh, well, I don't need to market anymore. Yes, you still continue to market, or I would say prospect, or to have those conversations, because number one, having a waiting list, really powerful for you and your confidence and your prices and everything. If you have a waiting list, if you're full right now, tell somebody like, hey, I don't have a spot right now, but if you'd like to be on the waiting list, I'll let you know as soon as one opens up. And at that point, they're like, yeah, and you can continue to support them in the meantime somehow. Like you can find ways to do that, right? And to keep the conversation going. Having a waiting list can be really powerful for you and for them in terms of positioning. And then secondly, if your conversation is continuing but you don't have space, you can also subcontract another coach or connect them with other resource. You can still find a way to serve. And you're still serving people even when you're not being paid. And that's like one of the weird things about coaching is like giving away service and serving people, even if they don't become a client, is one of the like, it's part of the coaching process. Like, especially at the beginning, it's a really good way to feel confident you're creating value, that you're changing lives. And if you ever don't have clients, just remember all the conversations you're having are changing people's lives. You're making a difference, and that can light you up. And so don't forget, always be conversationing even outside of your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Another aspect that I would say for this level is important is to start, if it hasn't already happened, to start to develop systems. Because in this phase, you are getting more clients, as you know, kind of Daniel was talking about. You're getting more clients and you're doing more work, and you might be reaching capacity for your availability in, you know, based on your lifestyle. And so you can have have a waiting list. You could start thinking about, okay, maybe I'll do a group or doing some other creative things. But developing systems and getting those in place is really important. And we talk about that in the launch phase, but you don't need the super fancy $100 a month database CRM system when you only have 10 to 15 to 20 to 30 people you're reaching out on. You can use a spreadsheet, like, if you want to. So it doesn't have to be super fancy. It is important to track, but you don't need to get super fancy with the systems. But once you start reaching capacity and your time now is literally, you're getting value, money for your time, this is where really understanding and implementing some systems in your business to be able to streamline what's going on. This is where that's I think, the most critical. And then that becomes even more critical when you're scaling, which is the next phase. But that should be more tweaking your systems. And it's a second phase where you identified, okay, these are the things I need. And when I've been in launch phase, I start to notice, I'm like, oh, this thing is so clunky. Like, I don't like doing this. And I'm like, ooh, there's an opportunity there to systematize. But I may not actually be implementing the system. I'm just starting to recognize the gaps and the holes, so that when I have the income coming in, I can start to implement the systems. And sometimes you outsource those so that you can continue to do the work that only you can do, which is the coaching.
Yeah, and actually, systems it's really interesting because there's different kinds of systems, right? So if you're going to be consistent at the conversations, you have to have some kind of system. Number one, do not try to track it all in your head. That was something I tried to do. Alleviate your brain burden, let that CPU go to other things, and let a spreadsheet outsource some of that brain function for you. So much better. Or a list, or whatever way you do that, CRM, whatever it is. It's really cheap to just even use a whiteboard. That's fine. Whatever you can systematize and get things out of your head is great in the conversations, like tracking who are the people in the pipeline that you're having conversations with. When should you be following up with them? Do you want to not forget somebody? Which just reminds me, there's somebody in my pipeline who I haven't communicated with for a month that I've owed them a follow-up message. And that's terrible because I've lost my consistency, right? And so I'm actually in the process of rebuilding my own productivity systems And even me and my wife, we have a board on the wall with all the different projects in our life, because we have several major projects, and we have. So having a system about how to manage yourself is actually pretty useful too. So your conversations and your system, how do you manage yourself and what you need to do in life? You're building, what's the priority? How do you prioritize? And a coach can help you with that, of course. Both of these, a coach can help you with. And I'm going to say, because I like, for example, when you first start coaching, like when I first started coaching, I was sending them follow-ups that were like, everything in the conversation, in case you forget stuff, in case you don't know that I provided so much value. And I would provide these 4-page long follow-ups that would take me forever, right? It was just crazy, because they didn't have the coaching conversation because they wanted to spend another 4 hours reading my email. Just skip all that and distill it. That part of my system was distilling over time. It took me years to distill it down. And some coaches don't even send follow-ups. So it's up to you. Your system for clients to prepare for sessions. What are all these documents? It's just conversations. You have Zoom recordings. It's probably systems that you can continue to improve and tweak.
Absolutely.
If you can systematize the delivery, and you know that when you show up to session, your preparation is shorter because you know how to systematize that, your follow-up is short. For example, when I jump on a Zoom call with somebody, the share, and I click on AI summary to start. So I make sure I do those things. Those are the only things I got to remember, and everything else is set automatic. And then after the session, I have a very specific follow-up process that I do. And I've improved it over time. So that's another system. The most important thing is not to create how you're going to systematize your follow-up and your conversations. Like, how do you do the conversational follow-up, not the session follow-up? How do you make sure that you're consistently bringing people through the pipeline, right?
And using your what is your core value that you provide? Most likely it's going to be the coach. The after email that you neglect the routes, that is detrimental. And so focus on the most important things. Make sure you get those dialed in, and those peripheral things that are good, that do add value. I'm not saying that those aren't important and don't add value, but they are not the major value proposition. So be clear on what your major value proposition, and make sure that that is kind of stays your focus, and work on those other things and refine them as you're able, or as you have the revenue set aside to pay somebody else to attend to.
When you say I just want to clarify here, because I'm not sure I understood. When you say be clear on your value proposition, you mean the things?
I'm saying the things that are the most valuable to the client.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so yes, I agree with that, but I would also add, especially at the beginning, even if you do nothing but get consistent with your conversationing, you don't have to be totally clear, because you're going to learn, because you're in. Is valuable to the clients, but you have to go through the journey of figuring out like how to coach more valuably. By probably the most valuable thing to you and your clients is just going through the conversations, even if you're not totally clear on the value. You know what I mean? Like you learn by asking at the end of client, what was valuable? Like, what? Get anything out of the session, you know? That way. Like, don't ever miss the chance to get clear on your value. If there's one process that you do in your conversationing, like end the session and like wrap it up with a nice bow, so that you know what's valuable and they know that it was valuable, because they
because I asked, so, what has changed, what has shifted for you, over the last couple of weeks based on what we've been working on? And she's like, oh, yeah.
I'm gonna remember, oh, it's been so valuable to me. I need to continue because it's gonna continue to be that valuable and more as you continue. So sometimes clients need to be reminded.
That is in and of itself a productivity for being able to create a robust list of testimonials and that sort of thing.
Continue coaching, or they are say, hey, could you do testimonial? They're like, yeah, for sure. People are really grateful and they will do testimonials, especially if you made a difference for them. Valuable for them. I can't, like, you can't deny it. It's like I read 5 bullet points I sent them, and it was like that middle one is so good for them, and also helps. All fuel leads back to consistency. If you can fuel your consistency and take the water out, whatever's stopping you from being consistent, that's really the key. This is good reminders for me too. Like I'm just like, yeah, Daniel, you need to be more consistent.
Really shifting everything that is not your zone of genius to somebody else. So, and you get better than anybody else and that you love, that just are exciting, because when you focus on impact that you have, because you are really good at it, and things to all people, like you do often in the beginning, now you get to really kind of choose your lane and get really, really good at that.
And you make me think, Sherry, like the being all things to all people is a dangerous fallacy for coaches. It's also a dangerous fallacy for spouses. Areas that are non-strength, and we can't be every area for spouse. You can't fulfill your spouse's social life on your own. They need everything they need. And to think that you can be all things to all people is a danger. Your income. Let's figure out like your prioritization. How are you doing? That's great. I'm not a certified financial planner. Like sort of sharing some of my experiences, but this is a female client. And I realized like, actually, my wife would actually be a really great person for them to talk to. I'm sort of outsourcing a little bit to my wife. And something that I actually agreed that I could benefit significantly from. So I'm doing that first. And then at some point, they're probably going to make me an offer. And you don't have to wait till you're in the scaling phase. You could actually partner with somebody who does the complementary stuff of what you do that you don't want to do.
Yes.
Right?
Coaching. And I totally agree with everything you said. What I was actually referring to, so I'll have this as a complimentary point, is be all things to all people. When we start a business, I am my I have to run my books. I'm doing my marketing. I'm doing my sales. I have to do everything. And I don't have to, but most positions of coaches is we don't have this whole extra amount of money set aside to outsource that stuff. So I'm thinking about the business of coaching, and we often have to wear all the hats. But as that success happens and you get consistent and then you are scaling, you get to take off all of those extraneous hats that are not your zone of genius, which could include the types and specific things that you do in your coaching. But with the rest of the business, you don't have to do all that stuff. You can really choose and outsource those things in a way that makes sense for you.
Yeah.
All right,
As an
Daniel.
entrepreneur, it's so
Yes.
hard to know at the beginning how many things there are to do in a business. And at some point, you're going to want help with those things because you're not going to spend all your time on bookkeeping or on like other things that run the business. Unless you love that stuff,
Yes.
you're probably going to have to hire a QuickBooks or a person or an accountant or stuff like that. So
Yeah,
that's coming in the scaling phase.
So we talked about all the three phases, and the scaling phase is unlimited. Like, it just never ends. There's always ways to continue to scale.
Wait. Which is one of the things I wanted to say this because one of the things I love about coaching is that there's not really a limit to the scaling phase. If you figure it out for yourself and what you want, what that could look like for you, you can it's a business. So you can get creative and find different ways to grow a business. Absolutely. And so there's no theoretical limit to that, right? Especially if you're hiring a team, you could easily like conceive of a lot of different versions of scale. Could you 10x? Could you 100x? I don't know. It's up to you and what's possible for you, what you can create, what you can do with your team. You need to become the kind of person who can grow into a leader. If you want to scale with the team, you need to be the kind of person who can grow in your business skills. If you want to scale the business, like, okay, maybe you could 100x, but do you have the business skills to do that? Do you have the relationship skills to do that? Do you have the leadership skills to do that? Do you have like all this stuff, right, to do that? So I just want to say like that's possible, but there's a growth pattern. And if you're in this for the long haul, then I'm excited for you because you're going to be committed to growth.
Absolutely. So as you're listening to this, you will have found yourself in one of these phases somewhere. You're going to have resonated with things. And learning is the process of acquiring knowledge and changing your behavior as a result. So please don't walk away from this podcast without having changed something about you and your life, or you will not have learned. So I would love for you to just reflect on the things that we talked about, your reflections of your own activities that you are engaged in on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, so that you can make some small shifts, maybe big, but even small shifts can have huge, big impacts so that you can get more productive with what you're doing and where you're at right now, so that ultimately you can continue to build the coaching practice that you envision being able to have an impact through.
You know what? I'm listening to you, Sherry. I'm thinking, I'm listening to myself, to us talking to me, which is like, don't leave this podcast without something that I'm committing to change. And so the thing I'm going to do is, we just ran through this on the Mondays community coaching mastery community client creation challenge. We walked through the whole vision week. So in order for me to be consistent, I think I just need to rerun myself through that exercise and like establish, like write my vision out again, write out my expenses, and figure out like the exercise we did in the session, which by the way, if you do join coaching mastery community, you can join free for 30 days, get the exercise and then cancel if you want to, but we think you'll stay because it's so awesome in there. But like, if you go through that vision exercise, like if I go through that vision exercise, I think actually it would give me a huge boost in my ability to be consistent because I'm more clear and I have an updated version of this for myself. And then I should share it with people in the community. And actually, you know what I'm going to do, Sherry? I'm going to take a video of myself going through that whole process, and I'm going to build a workbook that anybody can use to go through the training that we just did. So, and I'm going to go through it. I'm going to record it. I'm going to post it in the community. And maybe that'll become part of our training as an example for people to see, how do you go from like not being consistent to figuring out what's the vision to be consistent towards. So I'm going to commit to that right now. Maybe in the next week or so. This week or next week, it'll be get done. So I need to do it for myself and for the community, and because I just committed to it on this podcast.
Beautiful. So thank you so much for listening. We love being able to do these podcasts. It's fun for us to be able to share what we do, what we see other coaches do, what we believe, the experiences that coaches in the coaching mastery community have, because this is the rich ground of the fertile soil where we learn and grow and can become masters of our craft. So thank you so much for giving us your time and attention during this time. And if you are interested in getting more insight, support, learning, implementation, then consistency, join or consider joining the Coaching Mastery community. So go to coachingmasterycommunity.com.
No. Go to cmc.coach /SKOOL because we changed the link.
Okay. So both will take you to websites and will give you information about the Coaching Mastery community. We would love for you to become part of our community and give value and receive value.